Welcome to the On Your Mind podcast, where we believe mental illness can be temporary and transformative. Stay tuned for innovative, effective tools from experts in the field of mental health. Hosted by Timothy J. Hayes, psychologist. This podcast aims to change the narrative around mental illness. Move from a place of fear to a place of hope and solutions. Here on Your Mind.
Melissa Hiemann has a passion for mental health and alternative healing, which stems from her own lived experience and extensive self-study. She has overcome various challenges in her life, including addiction, trauma, relationship issues, and financial difficulties. She has also studied various techniques such as neuro-linguistic programming, hypnotherapy, and timeline therapy. She has a wealth of knowledge and expertise that she shares with her students and clients. Melissa's mission is to revolutionize the way people learn and grow by offering cutting-edge courses and resources that facilitate personal and professional transformation. She believes that everyone has the potential to create positive change in their lives and in the world. Through the Center for Healing, she provides expert guidance, a supportive community, and a holistic approach to education. She empowers her students and her clients to reach their full potential and achieve their goals. Well, Melissa, welcome. Thank you for joining us here today.
Thanks so much for having me on. My pleasure.
I'm hoping you can start us off by telling us a little bit about how you got into the work you do and what drives your passion for it.
Yeah, for sure. So going back in my history, which I'm sure you hear a lot about every day from your clients, but basically my mum was 20 and had been in boarding school from when she was about 4 years old. She'd come over from Sri Lanka, and my dad was 50. He was grieving, kind of passing his wife and his daughter who died in a car accident. And then my parents were kind of put together, and my dad fell in love with my beautiful young mum from Sri Lanka. And they had me. And I think with the culture shock for my mum, my dad was from Germany. He was a big beer drinker, out on boats every weekend with his friends. And my mum with me, a little baby, I think she was really anxious, and she ended up, when I was 2.5, she wanted to divorce him. And so there's obviously trauma for a young child, even if it's precognitive, we don't know what's going on, we still can feel the family splitting apart. So that was kind of a huge, me looking back now, was a huge thing that my parents split. So I was kind of tossed between two houses. Their split up was quite amicable in a sense. They didn't fight over me or anything like that. But what I've come to found was that the partners that they chose after that, I felt very unsafe in both homes. So my mum ended up with someone that was an alcoholic, and there was domestic violence, and she had children with him as well. So I was witnessing that in my young years. And then my father was with someone who was, I don't know if we could actually label them a narcissist, but they definitely had narcissistic traits. It was my stepmom. So, and then I also went to school, basically primary school. I don't know what you call it in America, but it's kind of ages 7 to 12 or 5 years old to 12, I think. Anyway, I had no friends. I was bullied. And so kind of everywhere that I went, I didn't have someone to support me emotionally.
No safety.
Yeah, exactly. And so everywhere I was, there was that lack of sense of safety. And I understand why my mum couldn't emotionally support me because of what she went through, but it's still a deep pain that I have to still work through today. And my father was very loving and very affectionate and just, I love you, and constantly trying to hug me. And I was very standoffish. I think because of that, I didn't get that proper nurturing from my mother. And so I would kind of reject him. And I feel like I took on a bit of my mum's anxiety, even from when I was in the womb with her, possibly, or when I was a young baby. And so I was anxious around him, even though he was very warm and loving. And then what I come to find out, learning all this stuff, is that he was actually high functioning anxiety. That's why he liked to drink on the weekends. And so, yeah, it was I didn't feel safe anywhere. And And then when my mum finally left, I had to help my mum, being a young teenager, only 13 or 14, help my mum leave a domestic violence situation. She had 2 babies in tow. My brother had leukemia as well when he was 2.5, so we had all this extra trauma. And then I was help my mum, but then also I didn't know how to deal with all of the emotions that I was feeling. I didn't have someone to talk to about it. I didn't feel like I could open up to anyone. Sure, I tried to see a counselor, but that didn't really go anywhere. It didn't really help me at the time, my school counselor. And so, yeah, I ended up hanging out with the wrong kids. I ended up taking drugs. I ended up partying. There was sexual trauma from me just being exposed at such a young age. And yeah, I hardly went to school. My dad ended up finding out because I was going to a fancy private school, and he's like, why is there only 50% attendance in 2 years? And I'm like, oh, okay. So he made me get a job, and I did change my friends, and that did help a little bit. And I was able to finish high school, thankfully. But I still didn't know how to deal with my emotions. I still felt like my value was based on how I looked, and also my value was based on what I achieved. So every time I saw my dad who's seeing what I've achieved, and every time, like, and my mom was like worried about how I looked and things like that because I had acne and things like that. And so I constantly try to always have good news. And if I didn't have any good news, I just held it into myself. And I was still abusing drugs on the weekend, drugs and alcohol. And on the outside, it looked like I was doing quite well. I bought my first house when I was 22 with the help of my father. I had a sports car. I had a full-time job. But I was so unhappy, and I kept on recreating these relationships that I saw growing up. So I went into an abusive relationship, and I did it unconsciously because I wasn't aware that we recreate these patterns. So I saw my mum do that, and then I did it. And so now I ended up in my early 20s, I'm in an abusive relationship, similar to what my mum was. I ended up getting the strength to leave, but I would burn so many relationships and also just sabotage and not look after myself properly. I got to the age of 26 where I had got back with the abusive partner, cheated on him, like all of this terrible stuff that I was doing just in an effort to try and feel loved and try and feel okay and validated. And I was sitting by myself. I just moved into a 1-bedroom apartment. I had to sell my house. Like, it all crashed down around me. And I thought, I don't know if you've seen the meme, Timothy. There's a meme online. It's like, maybe I'm the problem.
Yeah.
Instead of me blaming everyone else and being a victim to everyone else. And of course, we can be victims sometimes, 100%. But in that moment, I was so down, and the drugs and the alcohol wasn't doing anything, and everything had crashed down, essentially my rock bottom. I was like, I need to get help. So I think I would have been about 24 or 25 when my quarter life crisis, I guess. And I'm like, I need to get help. And so I confided in a friend, and he mentioned a life coach that he knew, or he goes, there's something like a life coach. And so I'm like, all right, I'll go get some advice, as we think we need advice at that time. And so I went to go see him, and I went into the session, and I don't know if you've heard of NLP and timeline therapy, Timothy, those kind of modalities. He kind of was using those and a bit of Dr. Demartini's work. I walked out of that. It was a 3-hour session, although it only felt like an hour. I walked out of that session realizing how much my trauma had affected my behaviors and my life patterns. I walked out realizing that I was the cause, as an adult, of a lot of my issues, so I could take some radical responsibility. And it was really like my eyes have been cleaned, and even the colors are brighter on the street. Like, it was incredible. I really call it my awakening, essentially. And at that time, I knew for years, since I was little, I wanted to start a business, and I didn't know what that would look like. But after that session, and I was in a sales job at the time, I knew if I wanted to start a business, I should learn sales. So I was in a really hard sales job. I really threw myself in a deep end. I was in a cushy job before, but threw myself in a deep end. And then when that practitioner said to me a month later, would you like to study? I'm going to be training people, certifying people. I was like, yes, I am so in. I was so excited, and I signed up. And I did that course with him. And in the middle of the course, I remember it was like a lightning bolt hitting me. I'm like, I am meant to help people get out of their own way. It was like, bang, like I knew this was my purpose. So I completed that course, and I did a few posts on Facebook and started getting practice clients and my hours up. And I decided that I would resign. I mean, at the time, I didn't have children, I didn't have much responsibility and things like that. So I could take a big risk like that. I don't advise that everyone just resigns from their job straight away. So, and I started getting clients. So that would have been 9 years ago now. And it was definitely a struggle at the start. So I was doing the NLP, the timeline therapy, the life coaching, and I was helping actually initially because I studied, I have an advanced diploma in international business. So I was helping people that were doing startups and entrepreneurs just to help them unlock and get out of their own way a little bit, like fear of failure and things like that. And so that was going okay. And then I hired a business coach, and I didn't know that he was like also doing family constellations as well. And so in that, and I don't know if you've heard of family constellations.
Yes, absolutely.
You have, yeah, I thought you would have. And so I discovered some childhood trauma, some big stuff came up, and I was like, I remember that I call it a healing hangover after this big stuff come up from my childhood about my parents separating, etc. I felt like throwing up for a day, and then the next day I was all depressed. I even had to borrow my friend's dog, and I just felt like watching cartoons, and it was really weird. But I was processing my 3-year-old trauma, so it makes sense to me now. And so that then I had a really big realization that this work with NLP is amazing, and but there was a level that was missing. It was this deep somatic emotional work, because a lot of NLP is about reframing and kind of thinking of things differently. But what I found that was missing was the somatic part. Essentially, we can reframe things, but the old emotions that we didn't process from those traumas, from those hard times, especially me, I bottled up so much, those are still there. So I couldn't get rid of my addictions. I was still smoking, and I was still like, I didn't feel right, or I felt numb, almost like disassociated from my body. So then I started getting into and studying trauma healing, somatic experiencing, and all of these different modalities that actually help you get into the body and release the emotions as well, not just have a cognitive knowing of what happened and that's why you are the way that you are, but to also add the layer of, okay, like the body keeps the score, the body is holding the trauma still. And in those events, if we didn't have someone there to help us process the emotions, we often would bottle it up, and that is what holds the trauma in place. So when we are able to release the emotions and get the cognitive awareness as well, the healing is much more deeper. It's much more client-centered in terms of they get to experience their own wisdom and learnings and realizations from when they start to heal these root causes. And hence why the method is called root cause therapy, because we're working with the body and the mind together to get to the root cause of the unwanted behaviors or the unwanted patterns and limiting beliefs. We call them limiting beliefs that have been created through these traumatic or painful events growing up, or even generational, traumas that our parents went through, being able to heal those and heal whole gestalts or patterns that have occurred, or schemas, I guess, if I'm speaking in your language, Timothy, and being able to have conscious awareness of how it started, why it started, let go of like it's not completely my fault, be able to heal it, and our behaviors and our thoughts automatically shift. The burden of the heaviness of the emotions and how low it makes us feel, or angry or anxious, those start to lift, and we can start to actually like be in touch with our body, feel comfortable in our body, and be okay with all the emotions. We need all the negative and positive emotions. They help us navigate life. But when we have a huge build-up, that's when we can have huge blow-ups or meltdowns or spirals, if that makes sense.
So you mentioned the family constellations. Is that part of the work you do now?
No, I do teach a little bit of it in level 2, but I am not clinically trained in it, and I don't teach it as a modality in itself. It's not essentially a part of it in the root cause therapy method, no.
Have you tapped into the book It Didn't Start With You by Mark Wolin?
Actually, my sister just read it recently, and I was like, "Can I borrow that off you when you're finished?" Because yeah,
Well, I'll just
it's like
mention
very
that
aligned.
here for our audience, because it is a book by somebody who's been a practitioner of family constellations work for a lot of years.
Right.
And it's Mark Wolynn, Wolynn, I believe is his last name.
That's fantastic. Yeah.
So are
I
you using NLP in your work?
Yeah, so the main part, mainly what we're using is timeline therapy, and which came from NLP, like from Tad James, who, rest his soul, has passed away. But I've added other modalities to it. So there's the breath work element, there's the inner child healing element, there's a generational trauma element, and there's a whole one of the things when I finished my training, Timothy, was that, and I think this happens with a lot of practitioners and therapists, was that I wasn't clear on exactly how to run a session effectively. Like, you get all of this knowledge, and you get all of these understandings and of different symptoms that your clients are showing, and how you can give them some tools to work through that, and help them to see the patterns. But I kind of left my training with like, okay, I've got all these tools and understandings, but how do I run a session? Exactly. And that's just coming from me, from my paperwork background, being in international trade, I think. And I was like, I created what we call a testing sheet. And so the testing sheet, and what we train our practitioners to do, is to use it in each session, because these sessions, healing sessions, are intangible. This kind of work is, I think I feel better. Yes, I feel better that part of my life has improved, but I personally like to see the data, and I like to go from session to session knowing exactly what we're working on. So the testing sheet, essentially, we go through someone's life, tapping into their emotions. So if I say to you, Timothy, if I say anger from birth to now, who or what comes up for you? And you might have some memories and people or situations come up automatically in your mind when I say that. So we're checking on the, essentially, for lack of a better term, emotional baggage that people are holding on to, that are taking them away from being happy in the present moment. Then we get some feedback on all areas of their life. So how anxious are they feeling out of 10? How depressed are they feeling? How abundant are they feeling? How healthy are they feeling in their body? How are they feeling in their relationships? And we get all those numbers. Then we get data back on behaviors, unwanted behaviors or thoughts that they're having. So this, essentially, the core of this came from myself and my partner ran an outpatient addiction and mental health clinic in Melbourne for 4.5 years. And we specialized in ice addiction, because that's what my partner experienced, or methamphetamine, so those of you that don't know the slang. And we essentially, the way that we approached helping people working through addictions, and how I was able to overcome my addictions, was really influenced by the work of Dr. Hawkins. And one of his books, for those of you that are listening, is Power versus Force, which is an amazing book if you're interested in just how different levels of consciousness can affect how you think about the world, or how you can understand the world, and why people have certain behaviors. But essentially, what we did at the outpatient clinic was we helped people to release all of these trapped emotions, release all of this old baggage and what they were holding on to move their baseline of how they feel up to be in a more peaceful state. Because what happens is, when you have a lot of baggage, is that you have so much heavy emotions and negative emotions that when you take drugs, or when you, even, it could be sex or shopping, addictions come in many different forms, you get a sense of feeling peaceful and good for a little bit. And then, because it's not natural for you, you can't get there naturally, you tend to go back down to your old state, and hence the addictions. We are just trying to feel okay. So what we would do is try to help people to release and heal all the baggage they were holding, so their baseline for how they felt naturally was good, to where, almost to where the drugs would take them, so they naturally stopped using. So we never said to people to stop using. We're like, go through the therapy, and then you'll naturally see that you won't want it anymore. And so what would happen is, people would even try the drugs again, and it would pull them down, and they had a different effect, and they wouldn't want it anymore naturally. And so imagine like we could go back in time and help people to have a good childhood, have good bonding and attachment. That essentially we're helping them reparent themselves to have that, and with the safety of the practitioner, that co-regulation, as in having a safe space in a relationship, because of a lot of our traumas happen in relationship, we're able to help them to have that childhood that they couldn't have, so that as an adult now they've got all this wisdom and knowledge and not so much of that heavy kind of baggage holding them back. So we would go through that. And then we also look at physical issues. I mean, there's links to physical issues and pain from having a lot of trauma. So for those of you that are interested in that, you can look at the ACE study, ACE. Timothy, you might be aware of the ACE study. I'm assuming it's like they were helping people that were obese in a clinic, and they were looking at, okay, those ones that lost weight, and then there was a lot that put the weight back on. Why did they put the weight back on? And then they had essentially a checklist of, these are the very stressful experiences growing up, and the checklist comprised of, were you verbally or physically abused growing up? Did you have a parent that had an addiction growing up, etc., etc.? And so the more of these stressful experiences that they had growing up, the more likely that they would have addictions or would have physical issues. So that's a really interesting study that you can look into. So we look at that. We look at, are you experiencing any physical issues? We can address them directly with the client, or what we saw happen was that then physical issues would naturally start to improve as we were going through the therapy with them. Their physical issues would start to actually dissipate. So that made me realize, yeah, there is a link of the last manifestation of us suppressing and holding on to all this stuff that we do can manifest as physical pain and disease, and either directly through holding on to those emotions in our body, and our body not knowing what to do with all these stress hormones that it's holding on to for decades, or indirectly through, we weren't treated well, so then we don't treat ourselves well and we don't look after ourselves properly. We're not doing that consciously. Of course we want to eat well and exercise and everything, but if we miss that growing up, we miss being looked after properly, then there's a likely chance that, you know, we're learning how to look after ourselves, or how we were looked after growing up. And then we go through limiting beliefs. So in these traumas and stressful events, when we have a strong emotion, we can make a really strong generalization about ourselves and the world, especially ages 0 to 7. So, you know, if we lose our mum at the shopping center, and in that moment we're like 3 and we don't know if she's ever going to come back, we think we're abandoned, because everything is about survival when we're children and we need our parents there. We might create the belief, I am now alone, right? And so you might think, well, that's not a big trauma, but how that can show up later in life is that we feel very uncomfortable being alone. We will be willing to hang out with anyone because we just don't want to be alone, and we end up hanging out with people that aren't really good for us. We have anxiety in the future about being alone, and we will often sabotage our relationships to fulfill that belief. They're like self-fulfilling prophecies. Now, we're not conscious about this. We don't really want this to happen. And so what we do is we will put someone slightly under, so they're still fully conscious and awake, and ask, what is the root cause of why you believe you're alone? And sorry, I will take a step back and say we do muscle testing, so kinesiology muscle testing, to check what beliefs someone has in their subconscious. And this kind of work can be done online or in person. We teach people how to do it on themselves. But yeah, then we ask the subconscious, what is the root cause? And it might go back to when they lost their mum at the shopping center. It might go back to a trauma growing up. It might go back to their mother's or father's side, and they experience trauma that one of their parents or grandparents went through. I've definitely been in my grandmother's body and experienced that, because I didn't know why I was so uncomfortable about food and like going to the supermarket. I wouldn't even go to a restaurant. I was scared there was not enough food in the world. These weird thoughts that I had. And then I had a root cause therapist work on me, and I went back to, I was like in a kitchen all of a sudden, like asking my brain, what's the root cause? I'm in a kitchen and I'm holding a baby. There's like an older girl with me and 2 like little toddlers next to me, and I felt so sad. All I had was some rice, and I realized I was my grandmother, and I processed all the emotions and released all that, and it flashed up on the way back all the other times I recreated and felt like that in my life. And I had to check with my mum, because I was like, was this real? Like, and I checked with my mum. I go, because she'd never told me I told her I felt this old and I was holding a baby, and there was like an older girl and two younger ones. She goes, yeah, that's me and my brother and sister and our cousin that would come and help my mum on the farm in Sri Lanka. And my dad's business had failed, and she didn't have enough food to feed all of us. She just had a little bit of rice. And I'm like, wow. And anyway, suffice, ever since then, I can go to a restaurant just fine and enjoy all the food and not worry about that. So
Well,
that's just one little example.
and you get it. That's that cross-generational stuff, right? And you're
Yes.
talking about ACEs. I thought I'd mention for the audience
Thank you.
that
Yeah.
the book The Deepest Well by Nadine Burke Harris is a good way to get an overview without having to go read the ACEs study and trying to interpret it. And again, The Deepest Well, Healing the
Thank
Long-Term
you.
Effects of Childhood Trauma and Adversity by Nadine Burke Harris. And she was a pediatrician, and she was out practicing, and all of a sudden somebody told her about the ACEs thing that had happened, 10 years earlier. And she said, well, how did I go through medical school and not hear about the ACEs study? The adverse effects of childhood events on my health as an adult. And so it's very powerful stuff. It's prompting me to ask you, so in what format do you work with people? And do you work with people and at two levels? Do you work with them, you're the clinician and they're the client? And do you train other people to become clinicians?
Yeah, great question. So I was seeing a lot of clients. We had a very full practice for a long time, and now I've stepped into the role of almost. I do have a few regular clients that I've had for years, but I do mainly focus my energy on training now. So we certify people around the world now. We have an online training, and we have thousands of students that have been qualified or going through the course, the root cause therapy course. And then my partner has actually created his own modality with one of his practitioner colleagues. And so we've got two main modalities. And so this is where most of our time is spent. But anyone can do these trainings, and within the training is a lot of the healing work. So not only do we train psychologists and counselors and therapists and healers, but we also encourage people that want to go on this journey. They can come in and do the training. They don't have to be a practitioner and have clients, but within the training, there is the chance for a self-development journey. And then we also have mentors and senior practitioners that can actually do work with them. So actually do this therapy with them, and they can get exposed to this work and all of these understandings, and to go on their own healing journey as well. And if
And
someone's not interested in that, we do have a practitioner directory for if they want to see someone locally or they want to work with someone online, and they are insured and accredited through IICT as we are as trainers as well, which is the International Institute for Complementary Therapists.
and so what is the course of training or the length of training?
Yeah. Do you mean the link if they want to explore the
Well,
training?
no, the length. How long does it take to go through a training to get to
Oh, the
be able
length.
to be certified for you?
Yes. So with root cause therapy, you're looking at about 3 to 6 months. I do say 3 to 6 months because there is a core training, but you could be really studying for the whole year with all the resources and bonus courses that you get within the course. There's a huge resource library, and I'm always adding to that. And you also get lifetime access. So anyone that just pay the one-off enrollment fee, and then we do weekly live support calls. And so whether you just attend those during your training or you want some supervision and help with a client in 2 years' time, that's included. So there's lifetime access to our support and ongoing extra classes and training. So, but yeah, to answer your question, for the course, 3 to 6 months. If they do our other course, which is embodied processing, which is a bottom-up approach, it's more for people that aren't ready to dive into their trauma, but they need to build safety in their nervous system first. That one is at least 6 months to train in that one.
So what's the best way for people to access the programs and more information about this?
Sure. So I guess with my experience of going through school and not doing really well, what I came to realize is it is important that you resonate with the teacher for you to be able to take in the information. It's definitely helpful. So what we've done is we offer a lot of free courses. So there's a free introductory training to root cause therapy and also to our other courses. And we have a few free certifications as well for people that just financially, they're not in a place to commit to a bigger training, but they do want to start this journey. So they would go to the Centre for Healing. So we're in Australia, so we spell it slightly differently. So I'll spell it out. So it's the Centre, so TheCenterForHealing.com/free dash courses. So if you go there, you will see all of our free courses. If you're having trouble with that, just type in root cause therapy practitioner training in Google and we will come up as well.
Excellent. And so you said you have thousands of people who've already been trained. And are they mostly in Australia?
I would say maybe 50% are in Australia and New Zealand, and then the rest are in the US, Canada, Europe. We've got some in China, like we've got them all in different countries around the world. So the UK, so they're not all predominantly in Australia. We're definitely growing over there where you are as well.
And the practitioner directory is available at thecenterforhealing.com?
Yes, if they go to the centerforhealing.com // practitioner directory, they'll be able to find someone either online or hopefully in their area.
Excellent. Well, so what would you say is of all of these modalities that you've done, what would you say was the most directly impactful to you?
I still always go back to loving the timeline therapy because it is actually mind-blowing. If we can tap into, we just ask the intelligence of our body where the root cause of something is, and for it to take us there. And sometimes that is in the womb. I've had many clients in regression go back to the womb or go back to when they were 1 year old, where you don't think that you would be able to remember, but your body remembers. And for it to go exactly to that pinpoint, it's really incredible and never ceases to blow my mind. And that's why it's such a huge part of root cause therapy, because it has blown my mind. Another method that I've learned, and I actually, Timothy, because I had a look through your podcast, obviously, before you interviewed me, and you interviewed Dr. Bradley Nelson, who created the emotion code and
And the body code system, yeah.
And although I don't teach it, I am such a huge fan of that method because for children and animals in particular, where you can't really take them in regression, I found that to be, I've got tingles because it's so powerful and I can help my clients' children. So what can happen is and you might resonate with this, Timothy, is that you'll start working with your clients who are their parents. And as they start to realize the trauma that they've gone through, they've realized they've passed down a lot of that generational trauma unconsciously, and they start to feel very guilty, and they can start to feel like, oh, I can't believe I did that to my children, like I was passing that down. And for me to be able to say to a client, well, I can do a distance healing on your child, like what's your child's name? We can do some healing on them, or I can recommend Dr. Bradley's book to them to start doing healing work on their own children. That's been incredible. So that's kind of gone off track to like root cause therapy, but I just wanted to say that I was very excited that I saw that you interviewed him, and that's a really great alternative way for people to start addressing these trapped emotions.
Wonderful. Well, if we realize we're getting kind of close to the end of our time here, if you just get centered and take a breath and think, okay, so here's everything we've already talked about, but here's something that we haven't even touched on yet, or something that I really want to go back and highlight that you've already discussed, what would that be?
I think one of the really positive things about doing this work is that, when you work with a practitioner and you go and do these healings on these big or little traumas that have happened in your life, a really huge part of this work is the integration and being able to do it yourself. So I don't believe that we should rely on our practitioners and therapists for every time we're feeling dysregulated, for every time that we have an outburst, for every time that we feel like there's something wrong with us, right? If we approach this work like there is something wrong with us, then we're forever going to want to heal the next thing, heal the next thing. And even though we have the Center for Healing and we teach these methods and teach practitioners to do this work, at the end of the day, it's really important that you are very gentle with yourself, realize that there was nothing ever wrong with you, and to sometimes even just picture your inner children and just hold them and let them know that it's okay, that they're feeling that way. And I think there's so much power in that, aside from, actually booking in sessions with someone. There's so much power in that, and self-healing in just doing that alone.
Wonderful. Well, I greatly appreciate your willing to take time to share with us the work you do. And the intro will have all of the links for how to reach you. And I'm also grateful that you put out some of these trainings for people to get introduced to this, especially if they have either time constraints or financial constraints, and you do that for free. That's wonderful.
Oh, thank you, Timothy. No, it's my honor to be on here. Honestly, I'm just so grateful that you allowed me to be on here with you. So thank you so much.
It's my pleasure. Be well, take care, and we'll stay in touch.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.
Melissa Hiemann has a passion for mental health and alternative healing, which stems from her own lived experience and extensive self-study. She has overcome various challenges in her life, including addiction, trauma, relationship issues, and financial difficulties. She has also studied various techniques such as neuro-linguistic programming, hypnotherapy, and timeline therapy. She has a wealth of knowledge and expertise that she shares with her students and clients. Melissa's mission is to revolutionize the way people learn and grow by offering cutting-edge courses and resources that facilitate personal and professional transformation. She believes that everyone has the potential to create positive change in their lives and in the world. Through the Center for Healing, she provides expert guidance, a supportive community, and a holistic approach to education. She empowers her students and her clients to reach their full potential and achieve their goals.
You've been listening to the On Your Mind podcast, offered by Journey's Dream, where we support people through mental health challenges to a place of true and lasting well-being. If you love our show, we invite you to visit onyourmindpodcast.org to join the conversation, access the show notes, and discover our helpful resources. Thank you for listening.